Not saying don't pick the project that's your bucket list project. Just make sure that you go into it as objective as you can, because I want everybody to finish their project. Hello folks, welcome back to Random Rod Shop. You know, I had a friend of mine that I work with ask me this week, you know, what project would I recommend for him? And, you know, we had a discussion, and then it occurred to me that, you know, maybe you guys would be interested in the answer. So I've got a list of 3 things that are, you know, right at the top. When I look at a project, there are 3 things I really focus on. And then, you know, once you decide that, once you get through that, then, you know, you get the decision tree spreads out. So we're going to go over the 3, you know, questions that I use to myself. And then we're going to walk through the projects, and I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of the different projects. And I thought maybe that would help you out in terms of choosing the project, if it's your first project, or if it's your, you know, if you have plenty of experience building projects, you probably already got a list something similar to this in your head. So before we get started, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, hit the bell, you know, leave a like, make a comment. First and foremost, what genre are you looking for? Well, you know, what piques your interest? You like cars, you like trucks, you like American cars or trucks, you know, French, German, Italian, Swedish, you know, I don't know. You need to decide that up front, because everything kind of works its way back to your choice of project, right? If you start with a rare, incomplete car, you're going to have some problems. All right, number two, you need to decide really up front how much work are you willing to do yourself on the project, and how much are you going to pay to have done on the project. And it may be because you have no interest in it, right? You don't feel like you have the expertise, you don't have the time to learn the expertise, but you need to make that call. How much do I think how much labor do I want to put into this project? That comes into play when you actually start going out to look for a project. And number 3 on my list anyway is you need to decide up front how much time you are willing or have to spend on this project, and or how much money do you have to spend on this project. You know, there's a lot of cases where you can trade off time for money if you do it yourself, but you need to kind of put some guidelines up front, like, you know, I'd like this project done in a year, and I don't want to spend more than, I don't know, pick a number, $10,000, which would be an expensive car in my world, by the way. So you need to decide your genre, right? So you can narrow down what you are going to go looking for. You need to be honest with yourself up front, and how much you're going to do yourself, and how much you're going to pay somebody to do. And, you know, along with that, you need to be realistic with yourself and your family, or, you know, whoever else is involved. How much time that you can contribute to it, and how long do you think it's going to take, and how much is it going to cost? That said, my experience of these things is it's going to take twice as long as you thought, and in the end, it's going to cost twice as much as you thought. So, you know, you can lower the cost by dragging out the time a lot of times, or you can decrease the time by raising the cost. But invariably, Both of them go up on my projects. So once you get all of those questions answered, in my mind, there's a couple of rules you need to follow. So you really want to start with the best project that you can afford. So you want a project that is as complete as it can be, and it's as rust-free or collision-free as it can be. And that's all going to be based on how much you can afford to spend on buying the project. But I can tell you, the backside gets significantly faster and significantly cheaper if you start with a really good, project up front. I'll flip a picture here of the 67 Camaro. Now, for those of you who have seen the 2024 project vehicle, you've seen the picture of this, but I'll flip it up just in case, there's folks here that haven't seen this one. I put this car in the pasture in the mid-'80s. It was a complete car. Over time, my son had a friend who was big into Camaros, and he needed parts. I said, go get parts you need off of it. I really haven't been a big Camaro fan, and had a friend that needed parts. So that thing is set in the pasture until about a year and a half ago. My granddaughter, who's 11 years old now, 11? Yeah, I think 11. Decided that she would like to have a Camaro. So we went over with the tractor and we drug this thing out of the pasture. Now this car had no front sheet metal, no doors, no interior. The rear end that you see in the picture actually isn't the rear end for it. It's just there to, to let it roll. No trunk lid. The front suspension was froze up and laying in the mud. So effectively, what I started with was a shell. And since this thing had been sitting on the ground, what ended up where we're at this point is I have replaced the sheet metal from the dash all the way back around to the lip on the trunk lid, both corners, both outer wheel wells. I've had to go searching for 1967, I wanted factory parts on it, so I tracked down 67 fenders, 67 hoods, 67 grill parts, lower fender extensions, the doors. It had no glass in it, trunk lid, had to put a rear end together for it. I've bought all the new front suspension components. I'm still short of steering box because it didn't have a steering box on it. I've located a steering column for, again, 67. I've got 67 bucket seats. I've had to buy the gauge package. I've bought the console, the shifter. I'm still lacking the upper part of the back seat. So that's an involved project. At the end, it was like, when this is all done, it would probably have been significantly better if I would have paid up front to buy a car that had all these parts on it. And actually it's maybe 2 years. So I've been chasing parts for this thing for 2 years, and I still don't have all the parts chased down for it. So that comes into the time issue, right? That was an involved project. Buying the best car up front is always a better deal. Unless it's an expensive car and somebody wants to give you one. And then you still need to think about it. If you're short on cash and you just can't afford to buy the good car, and you're willing to, as you get money, to fix this one so that you can trade your time and labor for the money you would spend up front. I've done that, right? I've been poor a lot of times in my life. So that is doable, but you need to be realistic with it up front, right? All you're going to do is have a pile of disappointment in front of you if you think you're going to get this thing up and running and go to the next car show in 6 weeks. Not going to happen. The second rule that I haven't been as good at adhering to in my life. I'm trying really hard to get better at it, but early on I didn't really follow this rule. And that is, if you're going to use a donor vehicle, buy the best donor vehicle you can buy, right? You know, nowadays people are using the Silverado 5.3s. And you can go to salvage yard, you get the engine, you get the transmission. It's amazing how more stuff you need to get. In my world, I can't seem to, you know, if I go buy a salvage yard engine, you get a 90-day warranty on the thing, right? You can take it back if it's not right. Well, historically in my world, it takes me more than 90 days to actually get the thing in the car or truck and get it running so that I can figure out whether it was a good engine or not. If you buy one that's running and driving, right, then you know that the power steering pump works. You know that the air conditioning compressor works. You know that the engine runs good. You know the transmission shifts good, and you don't have to go through that whole thing. Now, does it cost you a little more money? Yes, it does, but in my mind, there's a huge advantage to knowing that all of that stuff works before I put it in the car. Like, I hate redoing jobs. As it stands, I've got 3 pickups sitting out there. I've got an 06 Silverado, it's a half-ton. I've got a 04 Avalanche, and then I got an 01 Silverado. Actually, I forgot, I got a 4th one. My niece is driving it right now. So I got a 2000 Silverado. All 4 of those engines and transmissions are going to find a home in the projects we got going on this channel. They all run and drive. The air conditioners work on them. The power steering pumps work on them. You know, they all run and drive as it stands today. So, if you can, when you buy it, if you need a donor, buy one that's operating. It can be bent. If you're going to kick the body off and just throw it away, you know, it being bent is a problem, or is not a problem. But you'd really like to see it running and driving. And you also, for the most part, you'll know how many miles that thing's got on it. I've never been convinced that I truly know what miles is on an engine I buy from a salvage yard. There's just no way to verify it, right? So hopefully you hung with me this long. If you have, I appreciate it. So I really don't like bumblebees. I really don't like bumblebees. Okay, if you've hung with me this long, I appreciate it. We're gonna walk around the projects, and I want to talk through the points that we've hit on and just highlight, you know, examples of projects, just to give you a feel for the complexity of each project. All right, I'll get back with you when we're at the first car. So I think we're going to start with this one. This is a 1985 short wide bed Silverado, you know, so it's a square body. This truck came from the factory, power steering, power brakes, 350, automatic transmission. It was actually a nice truck. It needs some work at this point, but it was fairly decked out. The body is sound on this thing. It's got very little rust on it. So as a project, the square bodies are a great first project choice. They've got modern conveniences. People have been hot rodding them for a long time. It's just a small block Chevy. Lots of videos out there show you dropping an LS in this, you putting a, you know, whatever your flavor of LS is, with the 4L80, 4L60 transmission, or you can put the factory transmission off the square body, on the back of the LS. For the most part, all the parts for this truck are available in the aftermarket, or this is a new enough truck, if we want to call it that, that there are plenty of used parts available for this truck. So if you can find a truck with the cab in good shape, right, limited rust, I am confident you can find all the parts to bolt onto this truck to make it whatever you want to make it. So for a first project, I think this is a great starter truck. If you are not really a Chevy guy, I would still argue this is a great first project, and you could buy one, fix it, sell it, and you can buy your Ford or buy your Dodge or whatever it is. So this is my oldest son's. This truck actually runs and drives. It doesn't look like it because I need to mow again and I haven't moved it to mow, but this truck runs and drives. We've been playing with different ideas on the dash. That's why the dash is all out of it. So we're going to move to another square body that in my mind is the next level up. Alright, so this is an 83 square body, and you can see it's got a 350 setting in it. It's power brakes, you know, it's got the power steering on it, but that's not the way it came from the factory. This truck was a 6-cylinder, no air, no power brakes, and no power steering. Had disc brakes up front, but not power disc brakes. And this had a step side bed. So this was a utility truck, if you will. The reason I think this is the next level up in complexity is, as you can see, I've already started adding the power brakes. I dropped a 350 in it. It's got a turbo 350 behind it. It has power steering. I haven't swapped out an AC box to put AC on this thing yet, but that's in the plans. And you can see that I've managed to locate a short wide bed to go on it. Again, that's all bolt-on, so this isn't a bad first project, but it is more involved in the fact that you've got to hunt down donor parts to replace all these. The brown truck we just seen had all that stuff in it, right? It's a good basis to get you going. In this truck, I've had to replace all of that. As a side note, this is a truck I tried to put those Silverado seats in, and that wheel is required. It's like a 13-inch steering wheel. That thing's required to actually even get in this thing. So the seats are got to come out. I don't think there's any way possible to put these seats in this truck without lowering that floor pan right there. Or totally redesigning the seat, which kind of defeats the purpose of just wanting to find a set of seats to go in here. So this is project 2. Again, it's a square body. All the parts are available. A lot of people have hot rodded it. It's a very popular truck. Not a bad first project, but it is more involved than the brown pickup. Let's go over to number 3. Number 3 is again a square body. This was 1980, so it's the first generation, if you will. It doesn't have the slopey nose on it. This was my dad's truck. This was a 1980 Big 10 half-ton, 5/8 ton, whatever you want to call it, long wheelbase, so it had the 8-foot bed on it. We picked the cab up and set the cab on a 4-wheel drive short wide bed chassis. In the end, this is the same motor out of my dad's truck, but it was a frame swap, if you will. It was a fairly straightforward frame swap. I had to take the cab off my dad's truck, set it on this, get it all bolted down. I had to locate, because the truck I had didn't have a bed on it, so had to locate another short wide bed. But all in all, not a bad frame swap. It's a square body, right? Popular truck, aftermarket support, lots of used parts, but it is a little more involved than the blue one that we just looked at. Right? This one involved a frame swap. This one's also, well, relatively speaking, not not overly complicated, but this one's going to need rockers, and this one's going to need cab, and I'm going to have to do some work on the floorboard. So relative to the first two we've looked at, this one's a little more complicated. Still nothing onerous, right? By and large, everything's a bolt-on in this case. Okay, this is our last C10 that we're going to talk about. This is a 67, right? Short wide bed, but that's not how it started. So I've been collecting parts for this. The blue pickup was a 1967 long wheelbase, 6-cylinder, 3-speed on the column truck, and it came in pieces. I located a short wheelbase frame to go under it, but you can see that this thing has some problems in terms of rust. It's kind of dark. I don't know if you can see that, but the eyebrow is rusted under this thing. So that header panel right there is all going to have to be replaced. We've got rust around the heater, obviously rust on the rockers and the cab corners, got rust on the cab mounts. So this is an example of all the parts are available for this truck. All right, this is a very popular truck, lots of aftermarket support, but this truck is going to require either a significant amount of time to fix the rust, or you definitely are going to have to buy panels. And given it's a 67 and it's kind of a 1 year only, unless you know, because the 68 is when they put the marker lights and the fenders in the bed, so you can find 68 to 72 fenders, but finding 67 fenders is a little harder that's in good shape. So primarily you're probably going to be looking for replacement fenders. Bed sides. You guys probably know as well as I do, finding a short wide bed for a decent price is difficult. As in the case of my 71 over here, I just bought new bed sides. You can buy the new bed sides for $1,200, which is a lot of money, but it's still cheaper than buying a bed. Popular truck, huge aftermarket support, but this is a much bigger project than any of the three C10s we just looked at. The trap that you can fall into is you're like, well, I'm not doing a frame swap, it's all bolt on. The trap you get rolled into on a project like this is that if you don't have a donor truck, there are a lot of pieces that you're going to need. All right, so for the front, you need the radiator support, the headlights, the grill, the inner fenders, the fenders, heater boxes. Regardless of what you do, you're going to have to put something in there. Whether you do, if you do vintage air, you got a couple of grand on top of that. But if you're going to put factory stuff in, you got to find the factory stuff. This was a manual steering truck, but it doesn't have a steering box, so you're going to have to put a steering box on it. Now, if you've got a C10, like a square body parts truck, all of this stuff can be interchanged with a square body, right? But again, if you don't have that, you're going to be spending some money on putting this truck together, right? No brakes. That's why I'm saying this is the next level up. You can get all excited about finding the project of your dreams, but you really need to step back and evaluate how much money you're going to put in, or time you're going to put into finishing that project. Because I can tell you, nothing is more depressing than getting halfway through a project and figuring out either you don't have the time or you don't have the money, and then the project just languishes for a decade. And then you end up selling it for half of what you got into it. I've heard that happens anyway. All right, let's move on. All right, here's the next one we're going to look at. So this is a 1963 Ford. It was an Air Force truck, had a step side bed on it. It has the 223 6-cylinder engine in it. It's a 63, so it has a solid beam axle up front. It was the year before they went to the twin I-beam. I put this bed on it. I picked up a 65 short wide bed, and so that is the bed off the 65. This truck has an emotional attachment because this is the truck we move round bales with. Both of my boys, you know, kind of learned to drive in this truck. They both disliked it, but because it's 3-speed on a column. Right, it's 3-speed on a column. It was high geared, so it didn't have much power, so we were replacing clutches on this thing left and right because we were, you know, backing into round bales and trying to move them. You might ask, well, why would you rebuild this one and not the 65? Well, it's because this one has family history. The difficulty I'm having with this is, you know, you look on YouTube, and the common way to, you know, hot rod this thing is put a Crown Vic chassis under it. And, you know, earlier, the first video, that Crown Vic chassis you saw, I bought it specifically for this truck. My problem is, it's just too wide. Right? It really is too wide for this truck. The wheels, you have to use what I would call modern wheels with a lot of negative offset, and that's just not my style. The other thing is to get that Crown Vic chassis in here, you got to really cut this bed up, right? Because the frame rails on that Crown Vic come up somewhere in this area, so you pretty much got to cut most of the bed out. There are different folks on YouTube that come up with different ways, but in the end, I want it to be a pickup. Like I talked about in the first video, the width of your swap frame really is important if there is a specific look you're going for on your truck. In this case, I really just want an old hot rod truck, which means I want the positive offset wheels. Right, I want it to look like a hot rod, which means the Crown Vic is problematic. I really haven't come up with a resolution on what I'm gonna do with this truck. But I think if you're interested in, you know, the old Fords and you've been hearing about the Crown Vic swaps, you need to go spend some time on YouTube and see how different people have solved the width problem on the Crown Vic. Most of them just use factory wheels that have a huge negative offset. There's a couple of guys, or at least one I can think of, basically split the fender front and back and widen the fenders to take care of that. I'd prefer not to do that, but if you're interested in doing this, you definitely need to go into this project informed, because the frame is the key to completing this project. There's plenty of options of, you know, welding on a subframe. People put front clips on. They've been putting front clips on for a long time. You know, I remember at some point the Volare front clip was the one to have. Then they moved to the, you know, the second gen Camaro Firebird and first gen Camaro Firebird Nova. I guess second gen Nova, whatever that was. Anyway, so front clipping it, Mustang 2 front suspension. Those are all options. And the truth be known, I actually have a 76 second gen F-body front clip that I drug home thinking I was going to put under this. Kind of having second thoughts. The front axle being a straight beam, manual steering, you can rebuild that for you restorers out there. I agree. All of that can be rebuilt. I just prefer to have independent suspension, power steering, right? I'd like to have a more modern truck. To wrap up the Ford, I have an emotional attachment to this truck. I really want to finish this truck, but I am really struggling to figure out what path is the right path to getting a modern drivetrain under this thing. Again, if you're going down this path, that is definitely something you need to think about. To wrap up our 63 here, this turned out to be one of those projects that I had it in my head what plan was going to be, how I was going to do it, and I felt very confident about that. But as I started, after I got the Crown, and I started taking measurements and really, really designing how these things are going to marry together, I'm just not so sure anymore. So this project is waiting until I make a decision. That's another problem you can run into with projects. You may have the plan in your head, but when you get the actual parts in your hand, you may not be so sure. All right. This one hasn't actually shown up on the channel. This is sort of one of those back of the filing cabinet projects that I've been working on for a while, gathering parts up. So this is an 88 Bronco 2. I've got the 86. I've got an 86 over there, but it's in the briars, so I'm not gonna walk over there. So my thought on this one was, I've got a Ranger cab that I would like to put on this Bronco frame. And you might ask, well, why would you want to do that? Well, primarily it's because UTVs, I'd like to have a UTV, right? But Kawasaki Mules, the John Deere Gators, Kubota RTVs, the Polaris, those things are really expensive. This isn't that much bigger, and if I put a truck cab on it, and I put a flatbed on it, and I've got a hydraulic cylinder and power pack, I could put a dump bed on it pretty easy. So I could make this my four-wheel drive UTV. The part of the complication on this is this has the Ford V6 in it with an automatic transmission, and I seem to remember it's a C5 transmission, so it's a C4 but upgraded a little bit, I think. Or no, it had the overdrive, maybe that's what it was. Anyway, it's got the bolt-on bell housing, so it's taken me a while to track down a bell housing for a C4 that will bolt to a 2.3 liter four-cylinder. I want to put a 2.3 Ford four-cylinder engine in this thing because it's going to stay in 4 low and it's just going to puddle around the place here. But as near as I can tell, the only time Ford used the C4 behind that engine was in the Pinto station wagon in the 70s. So I think I've located it. But this highlights, or that problem is another thing you need to look out for. You may have these grand ideas about what you're going to do and what you're going to swap, and to be honest, it never occurred to me that bell housing was going to be a problem. But it took me quite a while to chase down that bell housing. If you bought this as a project and you had a Ranger cab sitting, let's just say you wanted to do this, you bought this as a project and you got it setting out, set beside the house or in the garage or wherever it is, until you find that bell housing, you're not going to get that engine in there. I would like to keep the automatic, right? It's just a puddle around, pasture vehicle, so an automatic would work great. But if you didn't know that up front, you could have a project that is stalled for, 2 or 3, 4, however long it takes you to find that bell housing. You could have the project stalled, and it doesn't take long with a project just sitting and looking at it every day to get tired of that damn thing. I can tell you from experience, a project that doesn't move, if you have to look at it every day, yeah, you get tired of it quick. That's why this one's still in the pasture, because I want to do this one, but I don't want any negative thoughts on it beforehand. And the last thing, for those interested, I think the front cab mounts on the Ranger cab, they bolt onto this. The cab mounts back here, if you've got an extended cab Ranger, I think they line up. If you've got a single cab, you'll have to move the motor mount or move the cab mounts up to catch the back cab mounts. Not a big deal. I believe they're riveted on. Let me have a look. Yeah, the cab mounts are riveted on, so you can break the cab mounts and you can move the cab mounts. That was my plan all along. But if you're interested in doing this, just be prepared. You're going to have to move the cab mounts or make new cab mounts to get that body to sit on there. All in all, this is not a complicated project relative to some of the other ones, But this one has a parts availability problem. Just another complication you can run into when you're trying to decide what project you want. Brad, what are you doing? Fred's taking care of my pickup there. Okay, so this is the 1957 ton-and-a-half that was our hay truck that we've put on top of an Explorer, like a 95 to 98, 99 Explorer chassis. The reason I wanted to bring this one into the picture is, you know, it's a frame swap, and you know, you go back to the first video where I was talking about frame swaps. The width of this one matches up really well with the 57. The issue was the length, and so what I did was I put a trailing arm suspension under this so I didn't have to cut the frame. Really, that's a clean installation right there. The point of this is, you know, always try to think outside the box. If your project is something other than rebuilding and hot rodding a stock vehicle, right? If you're thinking about a frame swap or a body swap, you know, try to think outside the box. So this is a 57 cab. This is, I think it's a 1996 Explorer frame and a 1967 trailing arm suspension with the 1996 rear axle. Sometimes thinking outside the box can get you out of a bind or save you a whole lot of work. If we hadn't have done that, this frame needs to come, let's see, I needed to add like 12 inches. This is an Explorer Sport, and I think it's like 101.6 inches wheelbase. The 57 needed like 114, 115, 114. I think it was 114. We would have had to add 12.4 inches to this thing to get it from 101.6 to the 114. So, not to repeat what we've said on everything else, you know, thinking outside the box can save you a lot of time and money. As a project, this is a big project, right? This thing's going to need, this definitely needs doors. That you're looking at Bondo right there. So this is going to need rockers, cab corners. There's a little work in the floor. You know, the front fenders on the ton-and-a-half wouldn't work, so I've got these half-ton fenders. But these fenders, what I've discovered on this is this front end was pushed in. So I need to pull out these fenders that much to get everything to line up. And then you've got you've got all the logistics of body mounts and stuff like that. This is a lot of work, but not having to lengthen that frame saved me a lot of work. Something to keep in mind. Next car I want to talk about is the 1967 Impala. You guys saw this one. I drug this one in. I've got two of these. They're the hardtop version. You Supernatural fans, you'll know what this is. I drug these in from an old farmer's field a long time ago, in the 80s sometime. And if I remember right, he just gave them to me because nobody wanted a four-door. Right? Until the Supernatural series came on, nobody wanted these things, so they were used for either parts cars or they were just taken to the salvage yard and crushed. Then Supernatural came on, and now they're popular. The interesting thing is they made more of those four doors than they made of these. But if you go looking, you're much more likely to find a 1967 Impala Super Sport two-door hardtop than you are to find a four-door hardtop 67 Impala. So this is one of those cases where this is a really popular car now, but it wasn't a popular car, so the supply isn't as great as you think it is. And because traditionally wasn't a popular car, all of the pieces aren't available for this. There's a lot more pieces available for that 67's two-door than there are for this 67 four-door hardtop. As you can see, we kind of got we got a project here, right? This was sitting in my pasture. The no wheels, right? If you go back and watch the video where I drug this home, you'll know that this isn't the same frame that was under this. I've swapped frames under this. The other one was sitting on the ground, and so the floorboard, I don't know if you can see through the window there. I've got the doors pulled shut. I had a challenge to get the doors open. They were kind of rusted up, so I took the latches off. So floors are bad, rockers are bad. Well, floors are bad, quarters are bad on both sides. The roof is bad. Did I say trunk? Inner wheel wells, right? It's just got a lot of rust on it. And I can absolutely tell you, if my daughter-in-law if she didn't really want this car, I wouldn't have drug it out of the pasture. The only saving grace of this is I managed to find 2 four-door sedan parts cars. These quarters are in a lot better shape. It has all the trim on it. Bumpers are good. I've got this one, the trunk lid isn't perfect, but the trunk lid is actually serviceable. I took it off. I've got it set over. I've got to set it over against the truck over there. That trunk lid's in good shape. I've got 2 more 2-doors, so the front sheet metal doesn't cause me any trouble. Got interiors. So I have enough sheet metal, I believe, to put this car back together. Like I say, I've got another hardtop that's got a good roof on it over at my son's house. So this is one of those projects that if you have to pay somebody to do all of the metal work that's going to be required on this, you would be much better off to buy a good car to start with. Because if you've got to pay to have this fixed, this car isn't worth fixing. I can tell you flat out, this car is not worth fixing. Because there is not going to be a piece of this car that doesn't get touched. Looks like there's a rust hole right there too. So when you're looking at projects, you know, I know a few people who think this is the #1 bucket list car. All right, the series was so popular that this is the car they want, right? And if you go looking for one of these, the market on these things is pretty high. One of the big reasons is that the supply isn't as good as it ought to be, because nobody wanted these and they were just scrapped. So this is a situation where it's a very popular car, but there's not much aftermarket support on the hardtop only items. Even on the sedan, that chrome that goes along the doors, that is actually the same on the sedan and the hardtop, but it's not reproduced. Very little of the 4-door pieces are reproduced. So you have a popular car with low aftermarket support. And since I put this in the category of fad, I don't know 20 years down the road, will it still be a popular car? I don't have any idea. I really don't. But it doesn't have the longevity of that 2-door Super Sport over there, I would think. If you want to do a project like this, either buy one that is all there and in decent shape, it's got all the bits and bobs, or you better get a couple of parts cars to come with it. So this is a really big project. You know, the 57 is a big project. This Impala is probably the biggest project that's on my plate. Even though the Camaro, I think sheet metal wise, the Camaro was worse off than this is. The fact is, I can find Camaro parts. In this situation, I'm going to have to be damn careful taking parts off of those four doors so that I can use them as repair panels for this, which just adds another layer of complexity. All right. Well, we're going to move to the last one. All right, the last one, and this isn't really a project. I'm just gonna. This is some of the things if you're not watching, you can get yourself into. So this is a 2-ton Ford, 40. You know what? I don't remember. It's like a 49, 50, 51. I don't know. I bought this truck because it's got a later flathead in it. It's got the ABA heads on it. I forget what year it is, but I bought this for the engine. My oldest son thinks it would be a great project to take that, and I think it's a 25 Model T Touring, or model, I guess they called it a two-door. Take that 25 and shorten this frame up and mount it on this 2-ton truck. That project involves about everything there is to do with doing a project, because you could probably see it yourself. There's metal work, and there's welding, and there's cutting, and there's mechanicking, and anyway, he thinks that's a great project. And it may be. I just don't know if I'm prepared to jump into that project. All right. I'm gonna go put the camera back on the tripod and we'll wrap this video up. Well, I don't know if you guys were interested in that, and my intent was in no way to dissuade you from starting a project. Just make sure you go into your projects with your eyes open, and try to think objectively. When you see that bucket list project, it's like you've been wanting this thing your entire life. Make sure that you do your best to understand what it's going to take to finish it. And I've bought projects that are bucket list projects knowing how complicated and how expensive they were going to be, but I bought them anyway. But those projects, I found a place to stash them, right? Case in point, that Mustang. That Mustang is the most expensive project I got. And I knew that going into it. I paid more for that Mustang than I have paid on all the other projects put together, and I'm going to end up spending more money on that Mustang than I have all the projects put together. So it is a slow burn project because I have in my head what I want that thing to look like, and so it takes me a while to gather parts and pieces, to save the money to buy the parts I want. So it just is what it is, right? It's some projects are like that. You need a place to keep them out of the weather. Putting that car out in the weather, which is, we got it from my wife's uncle, and that thing had sit outside, and there was a lot of work, right? I have replaced the entire firewall on that thing, floor pans on that thing, frame rails on that thing. I've had to go in and, because it was a fully painted car when I bought it. So I've taken it all down. Apparently it had some damage at one point, so it had some 80s body work on it, which means it was a cave and fill type thing. So I have spent a lot of time and energy to make all that sheet metal straight and to take every bit of rust I can find off of that car. But it's just taken time. That's kind of the point of this whole conversation. I'm not saying don't pick the project that's your bucket list project. Just make sure that you go into it as objective as you can, because I want everybody to finish their project, right? It breaks my heart to, look on Facebook or something or hear people talking or have, old farmers or, that they've got this great project and they just never could get it. They never could get it together. And invariably they sit outside. That is the biggest issue, is if they have to sit outside, the amount of work you're going to have to do goes up exponentially, because rust never sleeps. And unless it's a really popular car in high production, right? A 55 Nomad is a really popular car, but the production is low, which means you go to buy trim pieces, and that's really where a lot of the money is, all the doodad stuff. You buy chrome on a Nomad, I don't care what chrome it is, and it is going to cost you. So it's like that 67 Impala hardtop. The chrome, which isn't even chrome, it's aluminum around the doors, right? There's 12 pieces, 11 pieces, I forget how many pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it's 12 pieces. That's $1,200 just to buy that trim. And that's if you could find it. Like I said, they crushed those cars. Nobody wanted a four-door. So your best solution is the car you want was high production, it's popular, which means it has lots of aftermarket support, and they didn't get crushed over the years, right? Because they were popular cars. Now, if you're wanting to be unique, you know what? I understand that. I really do. But just go into it prepared. Last thing I want to leave you with is, and this has been a hard and fast rule my entire life, do not use your gotta go to work vehicle as your project car. Unless we're talking, changing wheels, changing seats. Don't be monkeying with that car if that's what you need to get back and forth to work. Because if you can't get back and forth to work, you can't afford to have a project. So I have always adhered to it. My vehicle, it doesn't matter. I've had some bucket list vehicles I drove back and forth to work. No. The only thing I do to them things is keep them running, right? Maintain those vehicles, because without that ability to get back and forth to work, I don't have any money to do my high riding. So, I hope you liked this video. It was kind of fun to put together. I hope you find it useful. If you're still here, I appreciate it. And if you subscribed, I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We try to have fun here. Make a comment. Put in the comments, what your bucket list car is. Hit the like, do the thumbs up. And until next time, I'm going to get after this international. I'm Random at Random Rod Shop, and we're out of here.